Listen carefully. Read along if you need to, but try to listen first. Every sentence is clear. Every idea is complete. This story is for your ears. Part 1. The Mountain and the Man. Yesterday, on July 26, 2026, on the final stage of the Tour de France, a young man from a small country in Central Europe crossed the finish line in Paris, wearing the yellow jersey. His name is Tadej Pogačar. He is 27 years old. He is from Slovenia, a nation of just 2 million people, smaller than many cities in the world. And he has just won the Tour de France for the 4th time. The Tour de France is the most famous bicycle race in the history of sport. It takes place every July across the roads of France and sometimes neighboring countries, covering approximately 3,000 kilometers over 21 stages. The riders climb mountain passes so steep that most people cannot walk up them. They descend at speeds approaching 100 kilometers per hour. They race for 3 weeks with almost no rest. It is, by common agreement among athletes and sports scientists, one of the most physically demanding events that a human body can be asked to endure. And Tadej Pogačar does it faster than almost anyone who has ever lived. Key vocabulary: listen, then repeat. Endure, to experience something painful or difficult over a long period without giving up. She endured 3 years of difficult training before she made the national team. Descend, to move downward, to go from a higher place to a lower one. The riders descended the mountain at terrifying speed, leaning into every corner. Demanding, requiring a lot of effort, skill, or attention. Exhausting. The course was the most demanding she had ever competed on. Neighbouring, located next to or near something, especially a country or region. The race passed through neighboring countries before returning to France for the final stages. Part 2. A boy from Komenda. Tadej Pogačar was born in September 1998 in a small town called Komenda in Slovenia. He grew up in the kind of environment that produces cyclists naturally: hilly roads, clean mountain air, and a culture that takes sport seriously. He began cycling competitively as a teenager. He was not immediately recognized as extraordinary. He was good, clearly talented, but the cycling world is full of talented young riders who never quite fulfill their early promise. What set Pogačar apart was not visible in his early results. It was visible in the way he rode. He attacked. Constantly, joyfully, sometimes recklessly. Where other riders calculated and conserved energy, Pogačar would launch an attack on a climb simply because he felt good and the mountain was there. His style was not the careful, tactical riding of a chess player. It was the instinctive, explosive riding of someone who genuinely loves the sensation of going uphill as fast as possible. In 2020, at the age of 21, he entered the Tour de France for the first time. Nobody expected him to win. He was young. He was relatively inexperienced at the highest level. And yet on the penultimate stage, the second-to-last day of the race, he produced one of the most astonishing individual performances in the history of cycling. He gained almost 2 minutes on the race leader in a single mountain time trial, overturning what had seemed an impossible deficit and winning the Tour de France at 21 years old. He became the second youngest rider ever to win the race. Key vocabulary: listen, then repeat. Fulfill, to achieve something hoped for or expected, to live up to potential. She finally fulfilled her childhood dream of representing her country at the Olympics. Recklessly, without thinking about the possible danger or consequences. Carelessly bold. He attacked so recklessly on the descent that his team director shouted at him through the earpiece. Penultimate, second to last, the one before the final. She saved her best performance for the penultimate round of the competition. Deficit, the amount by which something falls short, the gap that needs to be made up. He was 90 seconds behind with 2 stages remaining, a deficit most considered impossible to close. Part 3. What makes him different? Sports scientists who have studied Pogačar describe him using a word that appears repeatedly in their analyses: exceptional. Not just talented, not just well-trained, genuinely exceptional in ways that are measurable and, by the standards of human physiology, rare. His ability to produce power on a climb, the pure force his legs can generate while riding uphill, is among the highest ever recorded. His recovery rate between efforts is unusually fast. His pain tolerance appears to be extreme. And his ability to maintain cognitive function, to think clearly and make tactical decisions, while his body is under maximum physical stress, is something that coaches and scientists describe as remarkable. But there is something else. Something that does not show up in a laboratory measurement. Pogačar races with what can only be described as joy. When he attacks on a climb, he does not grimace. He does not contort his face with pain the way many elite cyclists do. He smiles. Not every time. The Tour de France is too hard for that. But in the moments when he pushes the pace and the gap begins to open between him and the other riders, there is something in his expression that looks less like suffering and more like someone doing exactly what they were made to do. Key vocabulary: listen, then repeat. Physiology: the science of how the body and its parts function. A degree in physiology helped her understand exactly how training stress builds fitness over time. Cognitive: relating to mental processes such as thinking, understanding, and decision-making. The ability to make good decisions under extreme physical stress is a rare cognitive skill. Contort: to twist or bend your face or body into an unusual shape, often from pain or effort. His face contorted with the effort of the final sprint. Grimace: a facial expression showing pain, disgust, or discomfort. She crossed the finish line without even a grimace, looking calm despite the brutal effort. Part 4. The Tour de France. To understand what Pogačar has achieved, you need to understand what the Tour de France is. Not just as a race, but as a cultural institution. The Tour de France was first held in 1903. It was created by a sports newspaper as a way to sell more copies, a marketing exercise that became one of the great sporting events in human history. For over a century, it has wound through the French countryside every July, bringing millions of spectators to the roadside and hundreds of millions more to their television screens. The yellow jersey, le maillot jaune in French, is worn by the rider who leads the overall race. It was introduced in 1919. Since then, it has become one of the most recognized symbols in sport. To wear it on the final day in Paris, to ride down the Champs-Élysées in yellow, that is the moment every professional cyclist spends their career imagining. Pogačar has now worn it into Paris 4 times. He joins a very short list of riders who have won the Tour de France 4 times or more. Eddy Merckx of Belgium won 5. Bernard Hinault of France won 5. Miguel Indurain of Spain won 5. Jacques Anquetil of France won 5. And Lance Armstrong, whose titles were stripped from him after a doping scandal, officially won 7 before his disqualification. Pogačar, at 27, has 4. And he is still young. Key vocabulary: listen, then repeat. Institution: an organization or event that has been established for a long time and is an important part of a society or culture. The annual festival had become a cultural institution, something the whole city looked forward to. Spectator: a person who watches an event, game, or competition without taking part. Millions of spectators line the mountain roads to watch the riders pass. Strip: to remove an honor, title, or award from someone, usually as a punishment. His medals were stripped after he failed a drug test. Disqualification: the act of being officially excluded from a competition for breaking the rules. Her disqualification was announced 3 days after the race, following the result of a laboratory test. Part 5. The Lesson of the Mountain. Pogačar's story has a direct lesson for English learners, and it is one of the simplest and most powerful lessons in this entire series. The mountain does not get smaller. It is always the same mountain, the same gradient, the same kilometers, the same altitude. What changes is the person climbing it. Every English learner faces their own version of a mountain. A grammar structure that never seems to make sense. A conversation that moves too fast to follow. An accent that does not yet feel natural in your mouth. A piece of reading that requires too many dictionary lookups. A listening exercise that your ears cannot quite decode. The mountain does not move, but you do. Slowly, with effort, with repeated attempts, with days when you feel strong and days when you do not. You move up it. And what looks impossible from the bottom begins to look manageable from halfway. And manageable from halfway becomes achievable from 3/4 of the way up. And achievable becomes done. Pogačar said something in an interview after his first Tour de France victory that I've thought about many times since. He said, "I never think about the whole race. I think about the next kilometer. The next kilometer. Not the whole mountain. Not the entire language. The next word. The next sentence. The next minute of listening. The next attempt. That is how mountains are climbed. That is how languages are learned. Key vocabulary. Listen, then repeat. Gradient. The steepness of a slope, measured as a percentage or angle. The final climb had an average gradient of 9%, steep enough to make walking difficult. Altitude. The height of something above sea level or above the ground. The thin air at high altitude makes breathing harder and muscles fatigue more quickly. Decode. To convert a coded message into ordinary language. Also, to understand something complex. After months of listening practice, she could finally decode fast native speech without effort. Manageable. Able to be controlled, achieved, or dealt with without too much difficulty. The grammar had seemed impossible at first, but with practice it became completely manageable. Listening practice. Listen to the story again. Then answer these questions out loud in English. What country is Tadej Pogačar from, and how large is it? How many kilometers does the Tour de France cover, and over how many stages? How old was Pogačar when he won the Tour de France for the first time? What do sports scientists say makes him different from other elite riders? When was the Tour de France first held, and why was it created? What did Pogačar say he thinks about during a race instead of the whole distance? Now retell the whole story in 3 sentences. Out loud, without looking at the text. Start here. Tadej Pogačar is a 27-year-old cyclist from Slovenia who has won the Tour de France 4 times. His story began, "Keep going. Use what you have. Do not stop. The mountain does not get smaller. Neither does the language. But you keep climbing." SERA English. Keep going.